Hello, this is Chelsea Dade, founder of Communicate for Health Justice LLC, and welcome to CFHJ's Soft Launching Justice podcast. Soft Launching Justice is a podcast exploring how young people of promise are shaping the future today by demanding more. Hosted by yours truly, each episode unpacks the systems youth are influencing and challenging today, from digital culture and public policy to workforce and leadership pathways. Through real conversations, this podcast holds space for emerging advocates who are leading boldly while challenging norms, even if we're all still figuring it out together. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube at CFHJ. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Soft Launching Justice. Since it's Earth Month, I've been thinking a lot about climate justice, not just as a concept, but as something that shows up in our everyday lives. And I want to talk about where things stand right now, what's working, what's not, and I think there's actually real opportunity, especially for young people. This connects to work I've been doing over the past year. Through CFHJ, I facilitated climate justice communication workshops where we focus specifically on how young people can talk about climate, not just what they know, but how they express it in a politically divided space. There's often a disconnect between the academic and or research side of climate justice and the ability to translate it to various audiences outside of these circles. That's why centering communication is so important. Because if people can't clearly articulate their perspectives or don't feel like their voices belong in these conversations, then we're limiting who gets to shape solutions. And more often than not, those aren't the same people. Communities that are already navigating challenges, whether that's access to healthcare, food, or economic opportunity, are often the ones most impacted by climate-related issues. But they're not always included in the conversations or decisions about solutions. So where are we right now? I'd say we're in a moment where there's definitely more awareness. Climate is part of the conversation in ways it wasn't even 5 or 10 years ago. There's also more funding, but it's complicated as of late. Over the past couple of years, organizations are still navigating budget cuts and attacks on principles related to equity and social justice. Since early 2025, 400 environmental justice grants have been cut, totaling over $1.7 billion, according to an April 2025 Climate News report. You can track climate justice grants on the Natural Resources Defense Council or NRDC's website. Another conundrum we're seeing is that a lot of climate funding is still going towards large-scale solutions, infrastructure, or organizations that already have access and visibility. And while that work is important, smaller community-based efforts, especially those led by young people or focused on equity, don't always have the same access to resources. In fact, according to research from UNICEF, direct global climate funding for young people is extremely low, generally estimated at less than 1% of total climate finance. While young people under 30 make up nearly half the world's population, initiatives specifically led by them receive only a tiny fraction of available resources. In returning to the theme of today's podcast, there is also a disconnect in how climate work is communicated. I mean, what does climate even mean given who you are communicating with? That said, there are real areas of momentum. One is how young people are engaging with climate, not just as activists, but as creators, organizers, and problem solvers. I've seen young people connect climate to things they already care about, including food justice, wellness, fashion, and community building. There's also more opportunity in how we think about skill development, communication, storytelling, and the ability to connect ideas across different spaces. Those are critical skills in climate work, and they're still so often overlooked. But if more people, especially young people, are equipped to communicate about climate in ways that are relatable and grounded, that changes who gets to participate and lead. I think one of the biggest opportunities right now is to expand who sees themselves as part of climate work. If you care about your community, if you care about health, if you care about access and equity, you've already connected to climate justice in some way. And I think the work moving forward is about making that connection more visible and more accessible, not just through more funding, but through how we talk about these issues, who we include, and what we value. So if you're listening to this and wondering where you fit in, start with what you already care about. There's probably more overlap than you think. Thank you for listening to CFHJ's Soft Launching Justice podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you something to think about and something to act on. While we know that the climate justice space is quite bumpy right now, there is a lot of hope lying in our young people. I personally am inspired how youth in the States and across the world are mobilizing for climate justice in their communities. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to share it, leave a review, or send it to someone who believes in climate justice and youth empowerment. That's how this community grows. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can learn more about joining us at cfhj.org and on social media at CFHJ. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing for justice, and keep communicating.